Let's talk about Project 3, Lesson 14. When the air in a hot air balloon is heated to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, each cubic foot of air can lift about 7 grams. The function, f of x, for the number of grams that can be lifted by a balloon containing x cubic feet of air is f of x equals what? Okay, so we're being asked to write a function, but we're given a good amount of information about this function. We're told that it needs to describe the number of grams that can be lifted by a balloon that contains a certain amount of air, and we're told that for each cubic feet of air in the balloon, it can lift about 7 grams. So what does that mean? Well, think about it. How many grams can 1 cubic foot of air lift? Well, they told us, right? They said that 1 foot can lift 7 grams. Okay? So 1 foot can lift 7 grams. How many grams can 2 cubic feet of air lift? Well, if I've got 2 feet, it must be 2 times 7 gives us 14 grams, right? What about 6 cubic feet? Well, I would take the number of feet, multiply by that 7, and that gives me 42 grams. So think about what's going on here. Each time I'm given a certain number of feet, what am I doing to it? So how many grams could x cubic feet of air lift? What would I do to x to figure out the number of feet that it could lift? That's going to be my function to describe the number of grams that can be lifted by a balloon containing x cubic feet of air. Question 2. The function g of x converts x grams to pounds as shown. So let's pause there and look at it. So g of x equals x divided by 453.6. So this takes grams and converts to pounds. Perfect. Which composite function expresses the number of pounds that can be lifted by a balloon containing x cubic feet of air? So we have g of x, and we need to make a composite function. So our last function described, given a certain amount of air, how many grams we could lift, right? This is just taking grams and converting it to pounds. So we have f of x equals something, and I won't give it away. But you figured this out in the last question. So I have f of x equals something. And this tells me the number of grams lifted by a certain number of air. G of x just takes the grams and converts it to pounds. So I need to find g of f of x. I need to find g of f of x. So this composite function will be able to calculate how many pounds can be lifted by a certain cubic footage of air. So beyond that, what am I going to do to make this a composite function? I have g of x, I have f of x. What do I need to do to make this a composite function? Well, if you remember, this means that I take f of x and insert it anywhere I see x. So g of x would be equal to f of x divided by 453.6. But of course you won't write f of x, you'll write your function. And that will be our composite function that will describe the number of pounds that can be lifted by a balloon containing x cubic feet of air. Okay, to lift 1,000 pounds you must have blank cubic feet of air. So remember, we just figured out a composite function, right? It was g of x equals f of x divided by, what was it? 453.6. 453.6. And this function describes to us, again, the number of pounds that can be lifted by a balloon containing x feet of air. So this is the number of pounds that can be lifted by x feet of air. Perfect. And the question says, to lift 1,000 pounds, you must have blank feet of air. Okay, so I know I have 1,000 pounds, and I want to solve for the feet of air. So think about what you're going to do with that 1,000 number, okay? When you have this simplified, I know you end up with some sort of fraction that has, I believe it has an, well, I don't want to give too much away here. So I know it has an x in it somewhere. I know it has some number in it somewhere, right? Where is this 1,000 going to go? And consider whether the 1,000 will be in for x or be somewhere else. Because remember, this is describing the number of pounds that can be lifted by x feet of air. So if x describes feet of air, then I definitely should not substitute x for 1,000, because 1,000 is telling me about pounds, not about feet of air. So we are actually going to be solving for x. We're actually going to be solving for x, which describes feet of air, right? So 1,000 isn't equal to x, it's equal to g of x. So you'll substitute 1,000 in for g of x, and it will be equal to that f of x divided by 453.6.